About collars in chapter 10, and there's collar stand and roll type. So they're explaining what the roll is. So the roll line of like a jacket is like where the lapel folds back, and that edge is the roll line. In here, you can see that there's a crease in here. This is the stand portion of that shirt collar, but that roll line is this top edge. So they're explaining that. And your collar can be developed so that it's wider or it's shallower. But it has to do with placing, and I'm just sort of explaining, but this, your neck is round, the collar itself is straight, so when you force those two shapes together, you get a look. Versus a non-convertible, which is more of the Peter Pan shape, and it is already round, so you're not forcing a straight line onto a circle or a tube, your neck. But if you have a collar that is already partially circular, then when you place it on the neck, it reacts differently than the convertible. So the convertible collar is called a convertible collar because you can wear it closed or you can wear it open. And when it's worn open, that edge rolls out like a lapel does. Versus this one, when you wear it open, it just sort of hangs out. It's not meant to act in that fashion like a lapel. Because generally, because it's business, you would probably have it here. When I worked at United, we had to. So that's what it is. So basic shirt collar foundation. This is just a foundation for a basic shirt collar. This is what we're going to do. But for that, in order to do that, they want you to measure your back neckline and your front neckline, which I've already told you. And they have a space in the book for you to record it. You don't have to do that. You can put it perpetually on your torso block so that you have that for future reference. Or you can record it on some other thing, but they want you to have those. And then they want you to add it up. So in some cases, you need to know what the total is. So what we're going to do is this is what I do. It says to draw a line, A to B. So this might be, is this the first time that we're using this?
Using
the book. So A to B is 3 inches roll. So they're having you square a line in the center of the paper. Mark and label the following locations, A to B. So I'm going to draw a line. I don't care what the length is in my mind because I'm going to mark a beginning on here. So the right is always going to, I'm sorry. In this case, the left. I had to honestly think what hand I was holding the pen with. On the left side, it's going to be your back, just like it is on a sleeve. And on the right side, it's your front. So I'm going to mark this line somewhere. I'm going to say that that's going to be my center back. They want me to measure up at a 90-degree angle 3 inches. You can use your L square if you want to. I have to flip that. So that obviously is not 3 inches. So again, you don't have to, you can go back and mark it. So there's 3 inches. So that is A to B. Then B to C is the total neck measurement and label it as C. So on this line, I sort of went backwards. I'm going to measure the back and the front. So I'm going to do it in 2 pieces. The back is 3 1/4, so 1, 2, 3 1/4 inches. And then the front from that point is going to be 4 3/8, so 4 1, 2, 3, and that's C. What I'm jumping the gun at is that is D. This is always a notch. D is always a notch. This is the shoulder seam. So when you attach your collar, you know where the center back is because that's notched. Shoulder seam is a notch. And then at C, that's going to be your center front. But at this point, you're going to measure up a 1/2 inch. And that is E, is it not? Yeah. So what I'm going to do is with my French curve, I'm going to curve a line down. Well, maybe they don't even go that far yet. Mark a 1/2 inch, draw a curve. Yep, they do. Can I borrow your French curve? No, that's not French. This is our shoulder seam. So I'm going to, because it's slightly curved, I'm going to curve it and help it. So sort of midway down, you can push your French curve and curve to E. I have to go up a little more. So it's a gentle curve back down to your baseline, which is this line, AC line. From this point, what I'm going to do is I'm going to square a line up. That's 3 inches long. I didn't measure that, did I? It's 3. Yep. Oh, I measured 2 and nobody said anything. So this is 3 also. This is including the stand. So this collar, this type of collar, includes the stand that's on this collar. So these are 2 separate pieces. This collar has it included in it. At that point, I'm going to measure out 1 inch. And from E, I'm going to draw a line to F. And then this is a straight line. So I've made a rectangle with a point.
Could you drape a collar?
Of course. And when you take draping, then you learn how to do it. Center back. Your grain line is along the center back, so this is the grain. If you wanted it to go the opposite way, you could have it go the opposite way. A straight collar is devoid of this E, and you can see what that looks like. It's the same concept. Does anybody have any questions on this one?
No.
So once you're done with this, what you're going to do is trace it off. Just the important parts. I'm going to do the curve. Because technically speaking, what we have below is just the draft. It's not the collar, it's just a draft of the collar. So you want to copy it off devoid of all of the extra things, little lines. So you don't need this line in there. It's just a guide. French curve for that part. Always mark D. I'll put this back on for its location or remeasure it. So that's our notch. So far, so good?
Mm-hmm.
For the tracing, I copied that, but that doesn't even need to be there. I'll do it again. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take this second copy and I'm going to subtract from the top edge. And that gets us into our under collar. So what you do for your under collar, because it's not the same size as your upper collar, you subtract 1/8 of an inch at center back and you taper it to 0. If you are developing a collar and it has a scalloped edge, you do the same thing but on the bottom because it's straighter, rather than trying to find out how it goes back to 0 at that point. So here is yet another copy of the collar. And I'm doing it very quickly. You can take a little more time. And at the top edge, I'm going to mark it 1/8 of an inch. And then from this point to that point, and that becomes my under collar. Grain line is the same. Doesn't have to be a specific point, but make sure that it goes from edge to edge. What you don't want to do is, I don't want to even show you. Let's just say that this is a collar. Don't just do that. People do. needs to put it edge to edge to edge. So this is the under collar and this is the upper. Size 6, what's that? And you also know that folded basic collar. So what you had in construction was a full collar. So generally, you never cut on fold in the industry, so everything is done in a full piece. So what you would do is you would take a piece of paper and fold it. Let's just say that this is it. And then lay your collar on there and trace it off on that and staple it or pin it and then cut it out so that you have the full piece, like Brian just came and showed me, which you're probably accustomed to using anyways. So this is the under collar to my upper collar. Seam allowance is quarter of an inch. Collar, and it's slightly smaller than the upper, which you may have seen in the jacket even. Any questions on that? I'm going to show you the stand collar, and then I'm going to allow you to work, and then I'll bring you back for the Peter Pan. Is very much the same as what we just did, but the stand collar also has the name of Nehru. If you test the collar, you may need to, they talk about problems with collars, but you will find this when you make the sample. There's no other way to do it. Sometimes the circumference that you've created is not long enough to go around the neck, and what happens in that case, when you test it and you put it on the dress form, if the collar isn't long enough on this edge to go around and sit relaxed, it's going to ride up. So if you've ever had a garment and the collar is up like this, it's because there's not enough space. The neckline is too small for your neck. So in that case, your collar needs to sit there, right at the base of the neck, where that seam is, essentially. When you drape it to that point where that seam is. So in order for it to allow it to sit relaxed, you might need to cut into it so that it's wider. But this is through fittings that you would know that. There's no way of knowing that before you fit it on your fit model. If you are wearing the collar and it's loose and wavy, then you have the opposite problem. It's too big for the neckline and you need to overlap the pattern and so you would slice into your sample and you would take it, you'd make this length smaller.
So we're making a sample of this?
Yeah. But I'm just telling you in fitting. Sometimes you have fit issues. You never don't have fit issues.
So we're gonna have a fit issue with this?
You might, I don't know.
No.
There's a fit issue on something. It may not be the collar. Peter Pan we're gonna skip for now, but the Peter Pan collar when we get to it is a flat type of collar, which lends itself to the sailor collar. It's done in the same way. Peter Pan collar is named after Peter Pan. You don't necessarily see it in adult fashions, although periodically it does come. Chanel did it last season.
It was like really popular, like in like the early mid 2010s when I was in high school, like the Peter Pan collars. It was part of that, like I
I'm
don't
just
know.
trying to think if there was a designer that did Peter Pans, and I'm trying to think of if it was that era. I think it was.
Yeah, because it was like the pastel kind of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Chanel just recently did it, not in the show that, I don't know, that was live the other day, but in last fall, I think it was. But they did Peter Pan. So we see it throughout history. This is also, if you made it larger, it was very popular in the 40s, and it came out to here, and I have an example of it, but I don't have it here with me, on shirts, and that would be called a Bertha collar. Bertha collars were very popular in the 40s. They came out to here, and if you just think of Puritans coming over on the Mayflower, they had huge collars too. And that would be based off of this sort of concept. Religious garments also have large collars that are sometimes little capes. So this all, you could make a cape out of the collar too, if you enlarged it. But Bertha collar, which is not in this textbook, was something that I used to have to teach, but I didn't know why because nobody wore it. It also is the same sort of premise of some collars that you had on your vest, but a collar with a deep opening neckline. There's the Bertha. Popular, it would have been done out of laces. So the Mandarin collar, which is a stand collar, which is basically the basis for the stand for this collar, is also goes by the name of Nehru, who is the president of Egypt. He wore them on his jackets all the time, so it sort of was adopted back in the 50s, late 50s, the Nehru collar. So you'll see it, it's a stand. We also have it in, I'm seeing if they're telling you why it's called the Mandarin Nehru Chinese collar, military. On one edge, you're going to start off your collar. This one is only 1.5 inches tall, so it might be a little bit easier to do. So there's my center back once again. This is no different than what we did before, so the back measurement, 3 1/4. That's D, that's your notch. And then from there, you're gonna measure the front in 3/8. You're going to measure up 1/2 inch with your French curve it. The collar can take on different forms here at the center front, but at this point you want to square a line up 1.5 inches at a 90-degree angle from E, which was there. That was C. This is still A and B. That's A, that's B. And then you just want to follow that curve. On tuxedo shirts, you have a winged collar, and this is the same collar, which they're showing you how to do there. And that little flap would flap over and become the wing. So you see this on both men's and women's wear. Any questions? This can also be rounded if you want it to, which is exactly the same as the stand, which is rounded. But they explain that in the textbook there. So it's a Mandarin collar variety. And then you can see the 3 different intonations of that stand collar, which is all Mandarin collar, military, or whatever you want. And then, of course, an under collar is created for that too, and they explain the folding of the piece of paper to make the full collar. You can also have a collar with a stand, which is exactly this collar.
What's the stand part?
Off of that same premise of the Mandarin collar, but there's an extension on here for that 1 inch because this collar is not what we're doing today. But just so that you know that it is in the textbook. You can also have a collar with a stand, so you can combine the whole idea of a Bertha collar with a stand so that it stands up on the neckline and then falls over. Peter Pan, you're limited, but when we do it, you'll see what I mean by it. So you can combine the two